Hertel. I'm the Register of Deeds for Ingham County. When I took office, we didn't know all what was going on when I took office in Ingham County 2 years ago. In fact, a lot of people said it was a pretty easy job. But unfortunately, we've made it a lot more difficult than it is because we found a lot of these things. In every county in the country, there is an elected official who's responsible for actually maintaining the records of property. And the reason for that is that property ownership is a basic right of you as an American. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, is a destruction of those records. In dictatorships and in communist countries, you actually see an immediate destruction of these records. And what we're seeing is actually, in our case, the banks actually destroying the records that I'm supposed to keep protected. So what we're actually seeing is a situation where it affects all of us. And I think that's the biggest message, if I can leave you with anything today, is this is not something that only affects the person being foreclosed. Too often, that person gets demonized. Reality is that, yeah, there were people that were bad actors. But the most time we're talking about now are victims of the economy. People who had a job, had a mortgage, wanted to make payments, and fell behind because of they lost their job or got sick or some other situation. But it's not just that person who's affected, it's all of us. Your own property value has been severely affected by the foreclosure crisis. If you own property in Ingham County, if you have a house, the value of all of that one foreclosure in your neighborhood severely has decreased your own property value. Also community blight. You get a house that's not being taken care of, a vacant building that can be used for crime. Often the snow's not removed, the grass grows, it lowers the value of the whole community, makes it a worse place to live. And most importantly, as a tax base. As less citizens are paying into the system, and as those property values go down, what we see is a dramatic decrease in the taxable value of the county. So if you care about your kid's school, or you care about police and fire, or any of those things that are funded by local tax dollars, you should care about foreclosure, because foreclosure is having a dramatic effect on the government's ability to fund all those programs. Also, I just want to let you know, before we get into all this, it can be complicated. I don't want you to get lost in any part of it. If you have a question, ask me right away. I'm much more comfortable in a question and answer period than me sitting up here talking for 45 minutes. It's going to be boring for you and boring for me. So please, if you have anything you have a question about during the middle of this, let me know. So why did this happen? The major banks decided a while ago they wanted to save some money. In order to save money, they decided to stop filing documents in offices like mine around the country, and they started filing them with a company called MERS that they created, Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems. And in order to do that, they did two things. One, to save a few dollars, so it destroyed the actual records of who actually owned whose mortgage throughout the country. And then also, in order to be able to quickly transfer the property so they could sell it as stock. And we'll get into that a little bit later on, but those are the two reasons why they created MERS. It was supposed to be a system that was accessible to all. That was the original thought of MERS, actually. In fact, they actually said that they were going to have a computer in each office, Register of Deeds office around the country, that was going to be able to go in and see where your loan was on the MERS system. That never happened. I don't have a computer in my office that does that, and nobody else does around the country. That was their initial promise that they broke. But they also, the way MERS runs is they have 65 employees and 35 million loans across the country. So if that could tell you, that just doesn't make any sense. You can't manage 35 million loans with 65 employees. It doesn't work. So in order to do that, they hired 2,000 vice presidents across the country. These vice presidents are actually employees at foreclosure firms. So when we talk to you about foreclosures, you know, we hear about this, you actually have these employees of MERS that are the employees now of foreclosure firms. But we have to remember what that is, that the bank gave a lot of power to MERS, and MERS has given a lot of power to foreclosure attorneys. So now all of a sudden the foreclosure attorney has a lot of the same powers that that original bank had. But their only interest is actually in foreclosures. So you actually can see a pattern that where the only option is to push people into foreclosure in many ways. MERS got even so big that they actually started foreclosing in their own name, even though they weren't actually a bank. They actually started foreclosing on thousands of people across the state, tens of thousands across the state, actually thousands just in Ingham County, where they actually foreclosed even though they weren't the bank. So now the same person who is getting paid to do the foreclosure is also deciding, it is anyway the judge, jury, and executioner. Now the Court of Appeals have ruled all these illegal, all of them. So we have now thousands of foreclosures that have been determined illegal in Ingham County and across the state. And that has had a number of ramifications. One, the person who actually owned that home now all of a sudden gets a home back. Sometimes in good, taken care of well, sometimes not taken care of well. So all of a sudden they have a property that, you know, sometimes been destroyed. You also have people that bought those homes legitimately from a third party, and they have worries about their own title. They're worried that this past sale could actually make it difficult for them to sell the property or get a loan in the future. And then you also have people that were trying to buy the. I had a woman who called me crying because she wanted to buy a home. She had the house of her dreams, going to go to closing, and it was canceled because it was a MERS foreclosure. So she had already sold her old house. Now she's living in a hotel. Can't even get, you know, can't buy the house that she wanted to, and is now basically homeless because of the situation. All because the banks decided to create a system that outside of our normal laws. Just keep going. Then on top of that, there was a rush to actually replace documents when they had to go to foreclosure. MERS had these documents at one point, but or they didn't. They were either lost, stolen, destroyed, never created. We don't really know. But what we do know is that when they actually went to go foreclose on people, they had these documents that were missing in the process. So they just started creating documents. And give you some examples of, these are some of the more famous robo-signers, and then go to the next slide, Tom. This is Linda Green. Linda Green's probably the one you've heard the most about on TV. We like to bring her signatures because they're kind of obvious. These are the three different examples of Linda Green signatures that we found in Ingham County. Linda Green actually never signed any documents. She was a mailroom clerk at a company called DocX. They used her because her name was easy to spell, and they paid people $13 an hour to sign that name. Random people, and in each case signing as a vice president of different banks and also MERS. Tawana Thomas is one of my favorite ones, only because Tawana signs both left and right-handed, which I've never seen anybody do. You know, we just keep seeing this pattern, and then in Michigan we're seeing other patterns now. Steve Dybert, who's here from MFI Miami, is the one that brought this one to my attention, and he's actually a mortgage fraud investigator that has offered his services for any citizen in this room that's actually gone through foreclosure. He'd give a consultation for free today. Usually costs a lot more than that, so thank you, Steve, for doing that.
No problem. Thank you.
But he brought this to our attention, Marshall Isaacs, and these are the various different signatures of Marshall Isaacs that I have turned over to the Attorney General's office. Yes? Sorry. Bye, Dale. Yes?
Yeah, the Court of Appeals deemed it not legal. Then why wouldn't the government shut it down?
The MERS foreclosures have been stopped. Here's what they're doing. Okay, in order to get around that, MERS is now assigning the property to other banks to foreclose in their name. So they're still foreclosing. This is just taking a little longer. And that's why, when we get into this in a minute, we've actually hired an attorney in Ingham County to actually fight these cases. Perry Thompson, who's the attorney we've hired in the back of the room, to actually handle these cases. So, if you're an Ingham County citizen and you're going through foreclosure, we have an attorney that can actually fight the banks on their own field in court. But just to be fair to Marshall, every time I give this presentation, I have to say, Marshall Isaac's firm came to my office and said that these are all his signatures. Now they do look different, obviously, and the Attorney General is investigating it.
Did you get him under oath?
No, I asked for, thank you, Bonnie. I asked specifically, actually, for a handwriting exemplar and for a affidavit signed, I'm not sure what signature they used to sign it, actually. But an actual affidavit saying all these signatures are his, but I did not receive that. What we did receive was a meeting with 3 people who said that he was a very nice person, and that he signs in different moods depending on, and also different locations. So sometimes he'll be walking, sometimes he'll be sitting.
So they're just reaffirming my theory that he has multiple personalities.
Yeah, there are different. Yeah, I mean they do look different, obviously. But then there are hundreds of people, different patterns that you can look at. And we're in the process of looking at different patterns and actually transferring more over to the Attorney General's office.
He's also under investigation in the state of Massachusetts.
Yes, that's true as well. He's also under investigation in the state of Massachusetts as well. And just so you know, real quick, Marshall Isaacs is a vice president of MERS. So when we talked earlier about the foreclosure companies, Marshall Isaacs is actually a vice president of MERS and also an attorney for all these different banks, and sometimes a vice president of other banks. And we've seen him actually involved in a specific case. The best example I have of to tell you what happens in terms of foreclosures and mistakes is the case of Bill Donahue. Bill came to me, called me up and said, Curtis, I'm losing my home, and I've made every payment on the modification I got from the bank. And I said, that sounds horrible. And we hear a lot of stories, so I said, please send me everything you got. And sure enough, I got it, and there were, return checks and everything else, and he had kept every piece of paper. And there had been an assignment from Marshall Isaacs to the foreclosing bank. Just remember that, and all the different signatures that were telling the story. So Bill Donahue, I sent his stuff over to Bank of America because Bank of America was the one that supposedly held the loan now. But it had been purchased at sheriff's sale by Fannie Mae. And Fannie Mae is supposed to be a quasi-government entity that says that they're working to help us all, keep our homes. So Bill made every payment, so we sent it to Bank of America. The day finally of his eviction, they called me up and said, oh my God, Curtis, we made a horrible mistake. So we're going to cancel the sheriff's sale, we're going to cancel the eviction hearing, but I'm a trust but verify person, so I still show up at the eviction hearing. So I'm waiting outside, are you from Orleans? Are you from Orleans? Orleans is the firm that Marshall works for. And finally some woman comes up, and sure enough, she was there to kick Bill Donahue out of his home. Now I said, you can't do this is awful. I said, you need to talk to your client. She didn't even know who her client was. I said, well, let me give you some phone numbers. So I'm giving her phone numbers to call her own client. Eventually, she can't get a hold of anybody. She says, well, how do I know you're telling me the truth? I said, I'm an elected official. I stand out in front of courtrooms, and I try to trick lawyers into not foreclosing. I said, come on. So eventually, she gave him 3 weeks, and eventually, Bill got to keep his house. But Bill's credit's been destroyed. Because that sheriff deed was filed, and it doesn't matter that they've expunged it. That's still on his credit record. All the late payments they had also filed on him were still there. He actually rented a storage unit because he had used all of his savings to make the mortgage payments. He just recovered financially, so his plan was to live out of his car. He had to explain to his adult children that they were losing the house of 25 years. Had to go home and tell his wife that they were losing the house, which I can't even imagine what that conversation's like. And his life was destroyed. All in a process that really has no protection for the consumer.
You know.
See, under Michigan law, it just takes a couple of these signatures. They post it in the newspaper, but there's no elected official, not even myself, that actually has the power to review these documents to determine whether the foreclosure is actually legal. Supposed to take whatever recorded documents in as a recordable form. We're forced to put them on file. The sheriff isn't given authority to review them. And the only time you really get to see a judge, unless you have enough money or have an Ingham County free attorney to actually file a proactive case, is when you get to the point of eviction where a judge wants to kick you out of the house at the end of the process. That's the only time you guys actually get to make these arguments, but a lot of times that's too late. So what we're trying to do in Michigan is actually try to change the law. Now we believe that if you want to take someone's house, their most valuable asset, the way we built wealth as middle-class Americans for a number of years, the way that you wanted to keep that house, take that house, you have to go through a due process. You have to go to court. And you should have to show a judge that you legitimately own it. And show a judge that you didn't forge documents. And play by the same rules the rest of us would. You know, if you try to get a modification from Bank of America and you miss one sheet of paper, one thing they ask for, do you think you're getting that modification? No way. They send you the whole package back to start over again. And if you're in default at that point, they don't stop the process of foreclosure. They just keep on going. But if they fake a document, you know, if they fake one document, if they're missing an assignment and turn in something false, they think they're above the law. In fact, we have a case right now in Ingham County where they actually are specifically saying they're above the law. Fannie Mae, and we're going to get to all the problems with Fannie Mae in a minute, but Fannie Mae, who sees all this on a national level, and they're being bailed out by your tax dollars right now. So when they see all this on a national level, they say, "Oh well, we really got to take this seriously," and they tell Congress they're going to try to work to fix these kinds of irregularities. I think that's what they call it in the system. But when they go and file to evict a man that we're actually providing law services to here in Ingham County, their argument is it doesn't matter that there are fraudulent documents in the record because the agreement's between Bank 1 and Bank 2 and you're not in the middle of it, so don't you worry your little head about it. We can take your home. And that's honestly, I wish I could say that that's a joke, but I was in the courtroom when they made the argument, and I actually got into a outside, wasn't really an official deposition, Perry. I don't know what we call that. Like a deposition, they just call you into a back room, and she explained to me the theory that it didn't matter if I testified because that's what they were going to say. And I said, that's ridiculous. I said, what you're basically saying is that two parties can agree to commit a crime. You said, well, that's the argument we're making. I said, so you're saying that you could commit a fraud, both of you agree to commit the fraud on a citizen, the citizen can't challenge it because you two agree to commit a fraud. She said, yes. Not exactly yes, but she pretty much said yes. Because she still used the argument. I even said, so what if it's like three banks, and so I'm a bank and I sell something to Bank B, and then I go, okay, I want to sell it again, and I'll sell it to Bank C. So Bank B can't challenge that? No, they can't challenge it either. I said, you're just legalizing fraud. This doesn't make any sense, but that's a legal theory that your tax dollars are going to support. So I apologize for that. If you live in Ingham County and you know, or if you know somebody needs help, you know somebody's going through foreclosure, we have a legal hotline. If you call that fraud hotline, we're going to review the documents on file. We're going to try to get you to legal services and try to get you actually some help. Because what we've learned, and this is throughout the entire process, that people that fight are more likely to be able to stay in their home. See, the banks realize that a lot of us are easy pickings. So they go after the people that aren't likely to get attorneys. So you see a lot of foreclosures in the inner city areas and rural areas because they figure, well, those people probably don't have the money to hire an attorney. So they're pretty quick when it comes to those places. And then the other places they're a lot slower and more careful. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have an attorney for all those people. So that's the number you can have. It's been hired by Ingham County. That's good. We also, if you were foreclosing by MERS directly, there's a class action lawsuit we can get you to as well. So on top of all of that, and of my other duties, I'm also suing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on your behalf. I'm suing them basically for you. And the reason I am is because they have not paid their transfer taxes. And what transfer tax basically is when you sell or buy property, you have to pay a tax on the property that you bought or sold. That's just Michigan law. And again, this gets down to the basic idea behind everything. That the banks, Fannie Mae, and you should all play by the same rules. And this is another situation that we're seeing where they don't play by the same rules. They try to avert the taxes. And Steve Dybert actually is one of the people that actually pointed this out and was very helpful in getting a lawsuit. Now, where do these taxes go to, real quick? I just want to, part of it goes to the county. So part of it goes to pay for the Ingham Health Plan and programs like that. And then a large chunk of it, the biggest chunk, goes to the school aid fund. So when they aren't paying these taxes, they are literally taking money out of our schools. So if that doesn't tell you how little they actually care about us here locally in Ingham County, that's what they're doing. And what Fannie Mae basically is trying to say is that they're part of the federal government. Now, they have a special relationship with the federal government, but I would argue they're not the federal government. Their CEO makes $5 million a year, and usually, I know government salaries pretty well, and so does my wife, and you don't make $5 million. And on top of that, when Fannie Mae goes to foreclose on somebody, they stand up in court and they say, we are a private corporation and therefore allowed to foreclose in this way. Because if you couldn't foreclose by advertisement, you have to go to court if you were the federal government, because you have to give people due process under the Constitution. So then, when they go to file the documents, they say, we are a part of the federal government and we don't have to pay taxes. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. And for us, that's just not acceptable. So we're suing them to get that money back for you.